Woke up today, the sun is shining.
Hi everyone. It's another wonderful Wednesday and another wonderful time with our wonderful CEO, Grandma Carol, the driving force behind the International Humanity Foundation, whose pioneering efforts have transformed lives through education, equality, and compassion. The International Humanity Foundation, as we all know, is a global nonprofit dedicated to bridging the gap between privilege and poverty. Through its programs across Asia and Africa, IHF empowers children and communities with education, leadership, and opportunities for sustainable growth. It is also committed to grooming future leaders and has witnessed the growth of many inspiring individuals around the world. Welcome once again to today's engaging talk, Grandma Carol.
Thank you. What a great description. Thank you.
Okay, so starting today's podcast. Today's podcast is on one key factor in having a nonprofit: good old money. It is very certain that for IHF to have existed for 20 years now, it must have relied on many donations from organizations. So we would like to hear from you, Grandma. How have you managed IHF financially from donors through to beneficiaries? Now, the first question on our plate is: does IHF engage volunteers and online supporters to contribute not just their times, but also financially to its cause? And how does it do that?
Oh, great question. It does that in a very diverse way. We have many people who can volunteer their time, but they can't volunteer any income. They're trying on the edge of survival and trying their best to get the training they need to move ahead in their survival. So the way societies are set up now, especially our non-nomadic, but all of our members, it's great value, huge value, that they are here as students, both learning and practicing skills and also serving the community of IHF and the centers around the world while they do. Now, you also have people who are these incredible human beings who wish they had the time to participate actively, sometimes during their sabbaticals or retirement or when they're given time off, they can. But by and large, time is the thing they just don't have, wish they had, but don't have. But they are able to contribute financially and are interested in what folks are doing within the organizations, but they just don't have time outside of their very full-time jobs, families, relatives, etc. So we have a big combination. Now, here's how our history has gone, and it's kind of interesting. We started when I was a graduate student. I was a single mother working full time and taking literally double courses at my university. So I could not do anything else. And yet I received that fellowship to go around the world and look at comparative programs to the program I was doing in the US with people wanting to attend college and wanting to learn leadership skills. How does that compute around the world with females and males and people from all backgrounds? How do they move through the classes? How do they bridge that gap when not born into money or into people educated in ways that become like a language for leadership around the world? So how do they access that information? How do they use that information to practice and move through the classes? That was my study. That's what brought me to the trafficking of humans, etc. And when I came upon communities that were at high risk of trafficking and just communities of all backgrounds who did not have access to the kind of information I was allowed access to as a child, even though I ran away from home young. It was my environment growing up. And that means we need to use people from all backgrounds in our finance and fundraising, because there will be a huge gap in understanding just by the diversity of the countries and backgrounds people come from. It also means I don't have the money. Not when I started. I had this deep, deep desire, like a fire burning in me, that we share the knowledge and come together and make sure children are not being trafficked or abused or without access to what can enrich their lives. And the same for their parents and communities. How, as a single mother who is barely scraping through herself and wouldn't even be in these countries if it wasn't for winning that scholarship, how do I do that? So I just had to tell them, we have to do it together. You're not looking at someone wealthy. I'm a single mom struggling in graduate school. And if you help me and you do this with me, then I will try to contact friends, contact students at the university, but you're going to have to talk to them and communicate with them the stories. I can't be the only person, because I'm going to return to all my graduate school work and my job and all the work left to me from being on this trip and not at my job and not in my classes. I can't do it. So if you want to do it with me, then I'll try. You want to do it with me? And that's what birthed us. So from the very beginning, even in the US, working with street children and women on the streets and women homeless and women from different backgrounds wanting to get into college, saying, how did you do it? I want to do it. It all came off the original TV stories and magazine stories that people would write to me. I would give them the same answer as I did when I was overseas on the fellowship. And that is, I didn't mind them writing my story of going from a runaway on the streets to what I'm doing now, but I can't do the work. I don't have the time. I can't answer all of you. If you want to start a group and you want to become a group, we called ourselves Helping Ourselves Means Education. They came up with the name. If you want to start a group, then you can start a group, but you're all going to have to do the work because I can't do it alone. And as far as any money to keep it going, I know you guys are talking about doing a magazine, a newsletter. I know you're talking about because we didn't have internet then, the cost of mailing out everything to each other. You're going to have to each donate like $1 or $2 a month. And then reach out to everyone, because I hate fundraising. I can't do it. That's how I started. And that's how Home started, IHF started, Save started. It was, yes, I know these skills. I know how to bring 250,000 together. I got it. I've done it, but I don't have money and I'm busy myself. So I can teach you the social movement skills. I can teach you the practical leadership skills, but I can't fund this. You're going to have to work together. Therefore, every single project I've done has been everyday people all over working on that and pitching in a little bit. That's just been the norm for who we are, and from its very beginnings. There's also another psychological reason. Over these 45 years, I've watched charities come and go, even big ones, and go corrupt or go bankrupt or have scandals and that's inevitable. That's inevitable. You're going to have the most gorgeous human beings in the world joining you. And also, you'll have some of the worst who are trying to get in to steal money or to traffic the very vulnerable populations you're working with. You'll have both, but the majority are going to be angels, which is why we've been going for 45 years. But inside, watching the ones that came and go with big splash and growing big, and seeing the burnout of many of the founders and CEOs, gorgeous human beings who, once they became a certain size, folks come in and say, people are great founders, but you got to get rid of them. Basically, they don't have the skills to continue. And that's why we're taking it over. And I saw it was usually when there were large funds coming in that kind of psychology took place. And I felt inside, oh my God, the people working so hard for me all over in the US, in every state of the US, in around the world. These people, as soon as there is large money, it will become corporate. And they are the gold because they've lived through the experiences they're trying to help others to not have to go through. So, how do we do it where it's a balance between the two, where we can keep going, but we're not dependent on looking perfect? So, we can't have people learning. They're going to have to already know in order to keep us looking perfect. How do we have the freedom to make mistakes and look bad and have people angry with us in order to teach what is real and the mistakes that really do happen and not have to cover them up if we're based on a large grant and we do or die from it? We're going to have to show them just our very best face, not because we're dishonest, not because we're bad, not because we're not doing what we're doing, which is wonderful for everyone, but because of our mission statement. It will almost destroy the very mission statement if we have to pretend to be something we're not in order to do what we want to do to help the children, etc. It's back to kind of Gandhi's philosophy of the means. The end cannot justify the means. If and for many, they have to. It's not their fault. But if they are helping to feed lots of children, to immunize lots of children, they will lose the donors that keep that needed good work going if they don't present their best face. Of course, just like when you have visitors to your house, you clean it up before they come and put in flowers in the vase. Of course. It's only because of IHF's mission to teach people from all backgrounds how to deal with the problems that come up in every charity and every nonprofit work. How do you deal with those real problems? That we needed to have a different thing where the living room is kept messy and we're saying, this is what happens when you have a bunch of children. This is how messy it is. This is what happens in the kitchen when you don't do the dishes. This is how it gets all the ants. And now, how do you exterminate? But if you use the bad ingredients, then it'll make the kids sick. This is reality. For IHF, we had to show the dirty house. And that best way to do it was to have little bits of money coming from everyday people everywhere, so that we weren't dependent on whether one group liked us or not, and we showed a pretty face. So that's how our finances have been. And it started with just my fellow students at the university. And then thankfully, I had the most incredible, amazing university president, Glenn Terrell, and he wanted to help with it. And we had the irony is we had the Women's Center actually fighting us, who originally gave me the award that gave me the confidence. They were fighting because they felt like it was going to make them look bad that they weren't doing that. So I got put in, lovely people, but I got put into politics very naively, as everyone will, and everyone does. It's part of growing up. But I realized even more, we have to be non-political, just for the children and just for learning, with the basic belief we want to make this world a better place in our limited life. And I want the tools to do that. And then I need the basic belief that there are enough good people all over the world, which life had proven to me. Yes, there are people who will misuse it, but there are enough all over the world that, given these tools, will be helping their communities and it will be enriching their lives. So, based on that, how we proceeded in our funding since the 80s, since the 1980s, how we've done it is we have sponsors who sponsor a child or an adult going to university or getting trained in IHF, or children coming to our classes. Sometimes it's a business that's sponsoring the class itself. We have projects that we've done over the years. Many we're not doing now, post-pandemic, partly because of my health and situation, and partly just because of a lot of other new things going on. But we have projects that then, for those projects, we would write a grant. So it wasn't the do or die for IHF. It was just the project. Let me give you some examples. The medical project, the livestock project. There have been a project of reaching out to communities that were living under freeways and didn't have actual houses in Jakarta in the early days, the villages that were out without any water in Bali in the early days. There were certain projects we take on, very limited, that we would apply for grants for and get grants on. But by and large, we have done it through individuals. And then we've had some surprises. I'll never forget when I went to the mailbox, and I still do not know who it is, some anonymous person. I assume it was probably a volunteer who came into some money or via their job in the future. We got a $50,000 check suddenly. And we've had various things like that that have kept us going. But by and large, it has been everyone involved in IHF who believe in its mission, who have experienced its value, even the children when they're grown. We don't have them do it when they're young, unless it's just taking video of them for obvious reasons, just like we are careful with their stories. But the adults, as those children grow into adults and they've been incredible in that over the years. We were fundraising, always saving at the same time, so that we're doing things. All of us have. I've done it since the 80s and perfectly comfortable. I'll sleep overnight at an airport. I'll take the flight at such and such hour that makes it less money. I take the buses where I can take the buses or the ferries or the train when that's cheapest. It becomes almost a delicious lifestyle since the 80s onward. In fact, when finances changed for me, from money I had put aside from the TV days and White House days and lecturing and consulting days, it didn't change my personal life at all, or freedom, because we have done this as a group, done IHF where the money is going to what our purpose and projects are. And that brings about some politics sometimes when the finances and how we fund. And the politics make sense so that you will have some organizations. We know World Vision was upset with us at one point, where if we say we're an all volunteer organization and even our executives, here is what they make and how few there are. Right now we have none. Executives that are making way below the norm, the very minimum, and the hours they put in. It is just a volunteer effort all these years. And that puts in politics, in that other organizations will feel kind of what they've always said to me since I was a college student: that'll never work, Carol. It'll have total chaos and you can't, volunteers are not dependable. Of course they're not. We know that. We structure in a way knowing that. And that's why we have different categories of volunteers. But it'll never work. It'll never work. My philosophy personally was, I don't care. I can't stand that there are 10-year-olds being kept in cages and trafficked. I can't stand that there are people who would want to help in communities all over the world, in every country, and I've been in most every country, that want to help if they just knew how and knew how to fit it into their lives in a way that they can fit it into their lives. I don't care, because we have to do something. We can't just say there's nothing we can do to make it better and do nothing. So I don't care if it's impossible to have volunteers, I'm going to do it anyway because I believe there are more goodness, and that goodness is stronger than any kind of what we call evil, which usually isn't evil. It just comes out of fear. So let's just try it. Let's just try it. And here we are this many years later with thousands of children and adults who have been through it over these years. Not big, not splashy, just small, deep rooted, going forward, all the politics, all the things that go on. And of course, some organizations, less so now, this was mostly in the early days, would feel we cannot have a all volunteer organization doing our jobs. They're stealing our jobs and they're going to make us look bad. When in fact, it's the opposite. In fact, every single my own children, birth children, are examples working for organizations that can't have a bad face. Of course they can't. And they're doing tremendous work. It's just different than what we're doing. And the opposite ends up being true, that everyone who goes through this training, even those who give little sponsorships to having someone trained, or sponsorships to a child, or sponsorships to a class, they also learn how much is involved in doing this. And we're training people who become fantastic for those other very worthwhile, wonderful organizations. So in the end, long term, those politics that existed early and were a problem with trying to fundraise, or my being a keynote speaker somewhere and they would feel when I talked like somehow it was threatening their job, that's ironed out over the years. And it's much more, I love it. Yes, there are a lot of bad things happening in the world, but I can tell you those kinds of politics have really matured in the psychological understanding between organizations that used to so fiercely fight each other instead of working together. It's been such a wonderful thing that's happened. Another wonderful thing that has happened in terms of volunteers, and then I'll talk about in terms of funding. Another wonderful thing that has happened is the people who volunteer. Even though we say the world is falling apart and climate crisis so scary, and the politics so scary, yes, losing democracy, all this upset people have, the values, etc., vanishing. I get it. I hear it. And I understand it's scary and upsetting. But what I need to share is the quality of the youth in every country around the world is the most sacred, even. Whether you're talking China or anywhere in the continent of Africa, all the spread diverse Asias, Australia, New Zealand, I can go on and on. Europe, the Americas, the quality of the youth truly feeling connected to all life and all people, and truly seeing this globe as their home, not dividing themselves as enemies by boundaries and saying we have to fight each other and win. The quality of the youth wanting sincerely to also do something in their life, along with their success goals, to do something that leaves this world a better place. That has multiplied epidemic. It has multiplied, like I cannot even tell you. The concept of no, you shouldn't do anything to volunteer. You should only get paid or you're getting ripped off. Two, we should all volunteer. That's how tribes have always kept alive. We should all learn these skills and help in some way this world. What meaning does my life have if it isn't also doing that? That has grown so much and has been one of the most brilliant aspects of my life, is to witness that around the world. I just can't tell you what joy it brings, along with the children that have grown up and the volunteers over time. With the fundraising, it is probably my fault, because I hate fundraising, that when the pandemic hit, we were fundraising together forever since the 80s because we had to. And it was the nature of what we are, and it gave a certain ambiance. And because we always kept a savings, we didn't want any community or center to ever suddenly go bust and all the effort people have put in be gone. So we really live simply, no fancy anything, and fun and saved and saved. Because of that, we made it through the pandemics when we had to close the centers and had to send the high cost of sending our GLD back to their countries and having to do everything online, which has ended up such a blessing in teaching and running IHF online and starting the new wonderful program of online GLD. But because I hate fundraising, I have not focused on that. And the new folks coming in, which is the nature of us, we're a school, we're an institute of learning. So whether you're young or old, you're coming in and flowing through if we're doing our job. Because of that, we've gone through savings that would have kept us going for anywhere from 2 to 5 years. And we've not fundraised. And we've not been doing sponsorships, and we've not been reaching out, and we haven't been even doing the letters we used to do to all our sponsors, and we just haven't. And we've been focused instead on reopening the centers and retraining people. And that's something I'm learning the hard way. That's my fault if it's anyone's fault. So we are in a position now of, oh my goodness, an organization that's gone on forever and we thought just would go on forever. And we bought and built ourselves our centers, and in that same very thrifty way that we always have. So we thought there was no reason we wouldn't go on forever. And we are now faced with the fact that we are in trouble if we don't start fundraising. We can't live off of the fundraising and efforts that everyone did together all those years and drain that where we're now down to the very bottom and we haven't been fundraising. So if I had any lesson to give any other CEO or founder of a nonprofit or person active and believing in whatever their wonderful nonprofit or social movement, whatever they're involved in. So many gorgeous organizations and nonprofits around the world. When I began, there were so many that were just cons to get salaries and launder money from bad sources. And I am just delighted with the amount of wonderful organizations now. Given that, the lesson is um, start your organization and keep your organization with all members owning it and being a part of the fundraising at all times. And don't get to a point where you take it for granted that that will just always continue and you don't steer the ship when it comes to the fundraising part, because that's where you can learn from my mistake of, even if you think, well, we'll go on forever because we own our centers and we're all volunteers, and look at how we've gone forever and how, despite the ups and downs, these good human beings that flow through keep it going forever. Don't make my mistake and involve all your members from the very beginning. And don't depend on one source for your finances. Let it be, because everyday people care. Let it be everyday people along with major sources. So you have your teams that are reaching out, to your grants, reaching out to your philanthropists and famous and wealthy, and doing that, but also do your everyday people. How do you do your everyday people? Here's how you do it. You do it by having the people who have actually experienced being a part of the organization and can sincerely talk about it, come together and have them make the little radio audio ads, have them make the video TV ads, because TV stations around the world have to do so much nonprofit showing it. Have them reach out to magazines, reach out to newspapers all over, highlight your different people, have them make those things that reach out to your everyday people. And then keep the amounts very small, because the majority of the world is trying to survive. The majority of the world is either hungry or not surviving, or they're working so hard to survive. So keep it to a few dollars a month. Keep it to amounts that can keep involved your everyday people. And don't become dependent on just one source, so you find yourself trapped, not because you're a bad person, but learn from my mistake to keep that active and going. So your one source doesn't end up being someone where you have to look better than you are. Because none of us like to have to look better than we are as individuals. It's exhausting, and it's the same for organizations. Najatu, is that all right?
Grandma, your presentation has been extensive and it has done well to answer some of the questions that I was going to ask you. What stands out in today's podcast is your unique approach to fundraising. I love how you have maintained the authenticity and how you have structured the organization's funding through individual sponsors and specific grants and contributions from those who believe in the mission that you have created. So I had other questions, but since you are in a hurry, I believe we can continue the next time.
Thank you. And we'll talk more next time, and I'll answer your questions. I promise.
Thank you too,
Okay.
Grandma.
Thank
Bye.
you, darling. Bye.